Hi, this is Josiah bringing you a research bite. What does grit have to do with high levels of performance and success? And what is grit anyway? The article we're going to look at today, there's none more widely read or cited than this article on this topic of grit, deliberate practice, and expert performance. There is nobody who's studying deliberate practice or grit, as we'll talk more about later, who's more well known than Angela Duckworth. Her TED Talk went absolutely viral. She really has become a pseudo-celebrity. In fact, people cite her all the time and talk about her work on grit. Though not always positive, people do know all about her studies. Just a quick Google search for her name and you'll see plenty of studies and articles and citations about her work. Oh, and if you'd like to see this video in American Sign Language, look at the video notes below and you'll find a link to the same content but delivered in American Sign Language. And subscribe to get future releases. The article we're looking at today is titled Deliberate Practice Spells Success: Why Grittier Competitors Triumph at the National Spelling Bee. The authors of this study are Angela Duckworth, Terry Kirby, Eli Tsukayama, and the infamous Anders Ericsson. This article was published in a Sage journal titled Social, Psychological, and Personality Science. It was published in 2011. For this study of the 274 finalists in the National Spelling Bee in 2006, 190 participated in this study, which is a pretty large sample size. The mean age of the participants was roughly 12, technically 12.88, but that's basically 12, almost 13. 47% of the participants were female, and the comparison between participants and non-participants in this study were roughly the same in terms of percentages of age and gender. So what the researchers did is before the competition on May 31st, they emailed all of the participants in the final competition with a questionnaire, self-addressed envelope, and inviting them to participate in the study. And as I just described, 190 replied. Okay, and this study measured several things. Today we'll just talk about a few significant results, but they measured lots of different things. One, spelling performance in the final round of the 2006 Spelling Bee. And the second one, which we'll look at quite a bit more in this research bite, is grit. And grit was self-reported on a grit scale, which was actually developed by the head researcher on this project, Angela Duckworth. This study also measured openness to new experience. Now, this is a personality trait within the broader framework of the 5-factor personality model. This personality model is the most widely used personality measure in personality psychology, and openness is one of the factors that are measured. This study also measured cumulative practice hours of what they defined as deliberate practice, as well as time spent quizzing on spelling words. The study also measured just the amount of time participants spent leisurely reading in order to develop vocabulary. So the leisure reading time was also measured. The study also measured attitudes toward verbal activities. This basically was just what were the participants' feelings about the various practice activities? How much did they enjoy quizzes? How much did they enjoy leisure reading? How much did they enjoy activities that were defined as deliberate practice activities? So the two things we're really looking at today are grit and deliberate practice. And the authors define grit as perseverance over a long period of time. Also having a passion for the activities that one is engaged in. For this study, the authors defined deliberate practice activities as learning new words, reviewing words that they had previously recorded in their spelling notebooks, and learning about the word origins. So these are the three types of activities they defined as deliberate practice. So here's what you need to know about this study by Angela Duckworth. Really, this study, one of the primary aims was to make a distinction between types of practice. In one type of practice, so learning new words and word memorizations, memorizing words, that would be deliberate practice. And then being quizzed by either another person or a computer program on the words previously learned, that would not be defined as deliberate practice. So the researchers wanted to make a distinction between these activities and determine how much time was spent on these activities and did it lead to success, most importantly. An important finding of this study is that the time spent on deliberate practice activities, those better predicted performance in the final round of the spelling bee, much more than the non-deliberate practice activities like being quizzed by somebody else or a computer program. So again, the most predictive activities were those that were deemed as deliberate practice activities. Now on to grit. This study determined that those who were grittier had better performance in their spelling bee competition than those who would be more open to new experience, which again is a personality trait that's part of the big 5 personality traits. So one way that the authors of this study determined grit was looking at participants' feelings about the activities they were engaged in. So over time, participants increasingly preferred those deliberate practice activities over those that would not be determined deliberate practice. However, and here's the important part, those activities were the ones they enjoyed the least. So, those grittier performers, they engaged in more of the deliberate practice. They had more passion and persistence in preparation time. And they also had better performance when they actually were in the spelling bee. This study also found that over a longer period of time, year after year, those participants that had higher performance, they increasingly preferred deliberate practice activities, again, despite also saying that they enjoyed them the least. Angela Duckworth talks about a previous study by Owings and several other researchers done in 1980, this time on middle school learners. And in this study, they also found that those middle schoolers that engage in activities that they deem to be not quite as enjoyable as other types of learning activities, and they chose them, they actually were seen to be more successful in their studies than their peers. So, what's the big deal about this study? Well, this study and the conversations that have come from this study have been like pouring kerosene on the conversation of how do we teach, how do we learn, and how do we become expert performers? So if grit and deliberate practice are really that predictive of high-level performance, well, how can we help people who are young, who are learning, who are growing, develop these characteristics so that they can also lead to successful accomplishments of their goals? This conversation and studies like this challenges the concept that success and failure is all due to genetics or even some kind of external environmental circumstances. In some of Duckworth's conversations surrounding these studies, she talks about concepts like goal setting. She also talks about concepts like positive reinforcement and how important both of these things are. She advises one should take a goal and then break it down into incremental goals that are achievable, and that will help somebody achieve the larger goals. She also says that really human beings need praise in order to accomplish their goals. Without praise, it can be really demoralizing and we can lack motivation. But with that praise and motivation, we can increase our chances of accomplishing our goals and increase our motivation. So go forth and be gritty and practice deliberately. A link to this full article is in the video notes below. Go ahead and click that, read it in full. There's a lot more information there. Remember, stay curious, pursue knowledge, and learn something new every day. This has been a Research Bite. I'm Josiah Faylauer. Thanks for watching.